Isaac Stone-Fish is a senior fellow for the Asia Society's Center on U.S. China Relations, and he joins me now. So, Isaac, North Korea's foreign minister says President Trump's recent comments are a, quote, declaration of war. You had White House Press Secretary Sarah Huckabee Sanders basically saying, well, that's absurd. Are we closer? Is this an escalation now? People have been asking this question. Are we closer to war than we've ever been?
I think the North Korean foreign minister's remarks were absurd. I don't think we are necessarily closer to war because of what's been happening. I mean, I think the big difference between now and anywhere we've seen over the last, say, 10 or 15 years is the really aggressive language that Trump has been using to describe the North Koreans, coupled with the North Koreans' increased capability.
In fact, in your piece in The Atlantic, which we're looking at the cover of the title there, you wrote, as it turns out, the North Korean officials referred to actions as a declaration of war, roughly as often as Trump claims that CNN is fake news. So there's a pattern there.
There's totally a pattern. And luckily, Trump just tweeted about an hour ago that CNN was fake news. So I think he helped underscore my point.
But so the thing, though, that people are looking at is that the idea of feeding into a narrative, right, on the part of the North Koreans, that the United States is somehow prepped and primed and ready for this takeover of the entire Korean peninsula. And this kind of rhetoric that we're seeing from the U.S. president is evidence of that.
That's why some of the things that Trump has said have been so counterproductive. You know, saying, oh, we are going to totally destroy North Korea if they cause more threats. That really, just like you're saying, plays very nicely into this North Korean narrative of victimhood.
So is this basically now a situation where you have rhetoric on both sides, but yet, given this sort of escalation in rhetoric at least, it makes it more difficult for there to be any kind of diplomacy take place?
I think the lucky part about where we find ourselves is that neither North Korea or Trump feel a need to follow through with their actions. You know, North Korea's been saying this amounts to an act of war for decades and have not waged war on South Korea or the United States. And Trump says all sorts of really outrageous things, doesn't feel a need to follow through with them. And so we are, and more luckily, in a position where both sides, hopefully soon, but maybe not for a while, can forget it and move on.
Could there be a danger, though, in the rhetoric getting to a point where it's so personal and pointed that somehow there might be a misinterpretation, or that, in fact, Kim Jong-un decides that one particular statement that is made by the American president is sort of one statement too far?
And we know so little about Kim Jong-un and how he makes decisions, and it could be that he's taking what Trump is saying much more personally and so overreacts. But I'm a little more worried about Trump overreacting, or Trump feeling that these actions, which North Korea has done in the past, now represents a clear and present danger for the United States, and it feels like he has to act militarily, bringing us into an awful, awful war. You're
more concerned about a lack of restraint on the American president's part than you are about Kim Jong-un?
So we know so little about Kim Jong-un. If I knew more, then I'd have more data to say, oh yes, we should really worry about his lack of restraint, or we shouldn't. Sadly, Kim Jong-un, even though he's 33, has more governing experience than Trump does. We have about 6 years where we've been able to see him in action. We have very little data on how Trump actually governs besides what we've seen over the last year, which many people have been really disappointed by. So I think both sides are a cause for concern.
All right, Isaac Stone-Fish, thanks very much for your perspective, Isaac.
Thank you.